Hey, welcome back, everybody. Today I'm going to be going over sex and gender as two categories, and why gender is more or less a useless category that's trying to basically take a bunch of the true dichotomies that lie in individuals, and some are separated as a result of sex, and basically attribute locations or the extremes to a particular sex. So I'm going to kind of elaborate on that as I go. But really, you can think of like the true dichotomies of personality, the true dichotomies of morality, the true dichotomies of individual differences. And then you look at them and be like, okay, well, it seems to be that some of these are more attributed or aligned with particular sex. So like males are more like this and females are more like this. And then you take those and align them with those as a stereotype or or you could say archetype in the best possible way. And then you say you can identify as one of these two things. When in reality, so that's a top-down perspective. The bottom-up perspective would be to say that the only differences between individuals arise out of individuals or as a result of sex. So and then obviously you can say the environment is the only other factor. So you have nature, which is our genetics, which vary, and our sex, which is there's only two of. And to argue anything different, I think, is what's causing a lot of the problems we're having in society. Like, sex is a binary in terms of our evolutionary history and biology. It does not care about anything you have to say or how you feel about yourself. Sex is a binary, and we're going to go over that right now. So the first thing we have to address before we address gender theory at all is what sex is, because a lot of people are confused about it, and I haven't even fully fleshed it out. But I've gone as deeply as I can into it, and like what you're trying to do when you create a binary category is say that what is exactly like what is something that if you categorize it this way cannot have any other distinctions involved in it. So that's what I do with sex, and this creates a binary to where there's no other way to get anything different, because we have no understanding of what it would mean to have this be different. So establishing sex, so we're doing that first. It's a presence or absence of the Y chromosome. So if you have a Y chromosome, you are male, and you cannot possibly be female, because it's impossible to have fertile eggs if you have a Y chromosome. At least with our current understanding of, chromosomes. And like, obviously if there's something we can do outside of, with technology and stuff, obviously you get into the transhuman argument, and like you can manipulate genes however you want to do things. But that is something that's further down the road. But as of right now, sex is a binary category, and I argue that we should not get rid of this, and I don't think we ever should, because it's something that has manifested over the course of billions of years. And to think that we are smarter in our short time on this earth, we better be very sure of what we're getting into before we mess with this. And obviously I can't stop anybody from doing this. And who knows how long this argument's going to go on for. Probably forever, but it'll just be something we have to hold in contention with each other. So the questions I asked are, can an individual without a Y chromosome produce sperm? The answer was no. And you can look this up for yourself, and I can probably eventually put some links to sources, but you could just literally Google it, you can ChatGPT it, you're going to get the same answer wherever you go. Has there ever been a case where somebody has no Y chromosome and they've produced fertile sperm? The answer is no. Now, can an individual with a Y chromosome produce eggs or fertile eggs? The answer is no. So these are the two answers you get, and this is the binary. It's whether or not someone has a Y chromosome. So that's it. There's no other chromosomes involved. So if you have a Y chromosome, you are male. If you do not have a Y chromosome, you are female. That is it. That's as simple as it gets. So not the presence of any number of X chromosomes or hormonal or primary and secondary sex characteristics. those are irrelevant. All that matters is whether or not you have the presence of a Y chromosome. And obviously there are very extremely rare circumstances where individuals have both let's say their body is made up of female chromosomes, and then just their gametes are made of the other chromosome, which it's weird. Or like they have a separate set of gonads that have different chromosomes or like genetic makeup, and that's happened. So there's wild things that can happen, but this is a binary category in 99.9999% of cases, and that's good enough. And there may be a case out there that I'm not thinking of that would prove this wrong, but for the sake of being as accurate as possible to a category or a binary, we have this as what sets that in stone. So whether or not you have the presence of a Y chromosome or the absence is determinate of whether or not you are a male or a female, not any of the other characteristics that come along with these categories. Because without a Y chromosome, you cannot possibly conceive of sperm, and you cannot produce fertile sperm. And in the other case, you cannot possibly conceive of eggs or have eggs in your fertile eggs. So it's impossible with or without this to be in that category. So males are those who have a Y chromosome. Females are those who do not have a Y chromosome. And it's as simple as that. Like, there's no reason to go into any gametes or shapes or sizes or anything like that. It's all about the presence of this one chromosome that changes everything, biologically speaking. So, okay, and we've created, me and ChatGPT created a summary of intersex conditions, and it took me a while actually to thoroughly vet out all this and then add my own context. But it basically gave me, so this is all me, but these categories down here, I've added some context to them, but these are basically cut and dry like answers. So it was like I asked it to categorize all of the intersex categories and then into two categories, either endocrine or chromosomal disorders. And I basically dismissed all endocrine disorders. And like, people are going to be like, well, why did you do that? Endocrine disorders are a very separate thing, and they can affect any aspect of your body. So just because these ones target your sex characteristics or your ability to reproduce or create gametes or any of those other things, it doesn't mean they are the result or manifestation of sex. So to call something intersex means you have the two sexes and there's something outside of those two. So these are real categories, and I do believe that that you can have categories that are neither male or female, and I go into what's possible with them as well. So first, let's go up here. We've done with that. We've categorized what sex is, and now we're going to summarize each intersex condition and the exact reasons why individual is intersex. We separate them into two categories, like I just mentioned. So with our current evidence with regard to humans, once we have the presence of the Y chromosome, it is impossible to have functional ovaries. This indicates that once an individual has a Y chromosome, they're male. If they do not have a Y chromosome, they're female. The simple categorization makes it easier to determine whether or not someone is one or the other. It may make the case that those with a Y chromosome with feminine traits typical of a female, but they are for all intents and purposes a male. So it may be the case that somebody with a Y chromosome has feminine traits and they manifest as a result of some of these other endocrine conditions. But that does not make them female. It just means that they have more feminine traits that align closer to what that sex would experience due to the hormone differences. Now, it doesn't change what's going to manifest as a result when it comes to sex. And here's the thing is I'm going to go over them as well. There's other categories. We don't need to concentrate just on sex. Sex is its own thing. Just let it be. Just let it chill there, understanding the chromosomes. That's all it needs to do. Everything else, we can come up with new categories. So intersex is one of them. And we don't have to go actually too deep into this. I can just glance over a lot of the intersex part, and you guys can read it because I'm going to link this paper in the description. But we don't need to go too in depth into that because it's just gonna take away some of your time. And I know people, I want to save people's time. So some of the basic things to know is that the categories people are trying to place in this binary are all on spectrums. So when it comes to the subjective underlying identification of interests, personality, roles, and behaviors, and amongst other things, they're trying to attribute this directly to sex, and they are not perfectly interlinked one-to-one. So for example, when it comes to agreeableness, when you see the two bell curves that males and females align on, there's a significant portion of overlap. I think it's like 60% that of their bell curves overlap. But does that mean 60% of people can just identify one way or the other, that they can be woman or man? Like, it makes no sense. So you have your sex. It doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. So you have your sex, but you lie on these spectrums somewhere. Like, where do you lie? That is for you to figure out, and it's something that changes over time, whereas your sex stays the same throughout your entire life and will stay with you after your death. So just separate the two. It's not a big deal. Keep them separate. And then gender is a conflate. Like, we'll go into gender later. It's just like it irks me. But so the only way to get there, to get to the position that these things are associated with sex, is if you stereotype or generalize the sexual characteristics that you think are attributed to that sex. So if I say women are more, fanciful or irrational or emotional, et cetera, it may be the case that there's some general truth in there, but as a categorization, it is a categorization error to say that if I meet somebody who identifies as this thing according to gender theory, can I assume these things about them, and then how often will I be wrong? Well, in the case of agreeableness, I would be 40% wrong if I thought that, 40% wrong if I assumed that the female was extremely agreeable, because there's a 40% overlap into the male domain. So where there's a pretty disagreeable females. So this is kind of where it falls apart. It's like when you start to look at the individual differences, it makes no sense. And that's what it's supposed to tell you when somebody identifies as this thing. It's supposed to tell you about their individual differences. So when it doesn't do that effectively and it misses, it's almost like a coin flip whether or not you're right or wrong. And this is one of the biggest personality differences between the sexes. So when it comes to something like openness, you're completely wrong. There's no way you can describe openness as one sex or the other. It's just wrong. So, like, for a lot of them, you are wrong on. Like, we are one thing in the end. Like, human beings are one species, and we diverge from each other for evolutionary reasons. And eventually I'll go into those as well. Not in this paper, but in the future, because that's going to require a lot more detail. But I'm digressing. So there's only one way to get there if you stereotype and you categorize them through cognitive dissonance, through a paradox. So these people are, and I actually have ChatGPT do this and go through the logic train of how you can get this and then question it on the definitions that it came up with. And I'll go over those later. So through those sexes of binary are alignments between sex overlaps to a significant degree when it comes to interests, personality, roles, morality, and behaviors. But in order to understand the differences between the sexes, you do have to understand where they're different. So it's one of those things that's like a catch-22. It's like, well, in saying that they're different, are they very distinct, obvious, different people or beings or things? No, they're not. They're one and the same, but there's certain areas in which we've diverged as a result of the evolutionary history that we've had. And those differences manifest in the differences in all these traits and characteristics. And all of it's result of our evolutionary history. So whether it's the facts of our genetic code and our nature, or the environment in which particular epigenetics and our brain manifest particular characteristics. So, or a change in the characteristics, you could say. So that's more or less how you should think of it. This does not mean that they are interchangeable. So the sexes are not interchangeable categories, but we measure some of them characteristics, a significant overlap in others, one of which is interest. It's one of the largest differences we know of between that of males and females, is that of interest in things and interest in beings. So men are much more interested in things, females are much more in beings or people. So when you have this, the largest difference, and it's like something, I think it's like a 0.7 or a 0.8 when it comes to the difference here. So it's like 80-20 almost between like whether or not, if you categorized 100 women and you said all these women like things or beings more than things, you would be right 80% of the time. So that's the most accurate we can possibly get between the sexes and the differences. So, I mean, there may be something that's more accurate and or like more accurate than that in terms of categorizing or predicting, but that's the biggest thing I know of currently, and that I think science knows of currently. So, in order to talk about sex, you have to talk about intersex, because it's something that everybody uses to either disprove or pull the rug out from under the categorization of sex. And there's two distinct categories, like I mentioned earlier. There's the endocrine one, and there's the chromosomal disorder. And I argue that all the endocrine disorders are just, you can completely neglect them because they have nothing to do with the chromosomes. They're all about particular genetics that change your hormones or your endocrine system in a way that makes you manifest particular sex characteristics. Now, are your sex characteristics determinant of your sex? I argue no. And obviously, people are going to argue against that, but this is my categorization. This is how I think of it, and it's the only thing that makes sense logically speaking. So it's very consistent. Get rid of the endocrine stuff because it still makes sense. You can still have these deficiencies if you are a male and you have something that makes you have female sex characteristics, like let's say you start to grow breasts because of your hormones change, or if you're a female and you have a lot of testosterone or other hormones and you start to grow facial hair and all these other things, that is just a result of the hormones and what your body does in relationship to the hormones that you're receiving. But no amount of hormones can change your underlying chromosomes. Like, it doesn't matter. You're not going to change your chromosomes, and if you stop taking those hormones, your body will alleviate back to its homeostasis between all those hormones that it originally imposed. So, all these disorders will not be included as they have nothing to do with sex, but are instead a disorder of the endocrine system and the underlying genetics that result from that. Or result in that. So these individuals have normal chromosomes, but issues producing or regulating hormones and proteins that lead to developmental issues. All endocrine disorders can be rectified through gene therapy, hormone replacement, or just understanding that the hormone imbalance is caused by an abnormality. So some of these disorders can be completely cured in the future, and we're going to be able to do that. But what you can't do is at a cellular level change every single gene or every single chromosome inside the body, and I don't think that's going to be possible. And if you do, I think you're literally just killing the individual. So you can change the hormones and the way certain genes express and create certain proteins, and we're going to do that and rectify some things. Like, imagine if you're not producing enough insulin out of your pancreas. Well, you can take out some of your cells. They'll put them in a petri dish. They'll inject the new DNA that will tell those cells to produce more insulin or less insulin or whatever the case may be. They'll put them back in. Your body will still recognize that it's like, okay, this is 99.9999% you still, so it doesn't see a difference. And then hopefully, you start, producing the right amount of the hormone. And that's how that kind of works. But we can continue because this paper is kind of long. So then you have chromosomal disorders, and these are the ones that everyone actually points to as, hey, look, the category isn't as binary as it may seem. But let's just go through what results in terms of reproductive potential, which is all evolution cares about. It doesn't care about how you feel about yourself. It doesn't care about your primary, secondary sex characteristics. It only cares whether or not what you have, excuse me, can reproduce and continue to propagate into the future. So, Klinefelter syndrome is the result of having an extra X chromosome in an individual with an XY karyotype, leading to the hypogonadism and incomplete masculinization. So, and their reproductive potential is that some men can have children through the assistance of reproductive technologies like testicular sperm extraction and these other ones, but it's not natural for them to conceive naturally. It's not possible for them to conceive naturally, and extremely rare due to impaired spermatogenesis. So this requires them to go in, extract certain amounts of sperm, and then they test the sperm and see what the genetic makeup is of each one. And some of the sperms can have normal genetic code, and then they take those, and those are the ones they inject into the egg if possible. And if not, then they just inject the genes with the extra chromosome. And I don't think anybody would want to do that for their child, as there likely could have detrimental effects. So I do not think that people would want to reproduce, regardless of whether or not they can. So the only possible way for these individuals to reproduce is if it's assisted through technology. So they cannot do it naturally. And obviously, there's a lot of people who can have healthy offspring that can't conceive naturally due to whatever issues they have, but those are just issues. There's something happening that's not normal, that's not supposed to happen when it comes to evolutionarily speaking. So when things function naturally, they should be able to happen naturally. So functional testes. Testes may produce small quantities of viable sperm in some cases, particularly in mosaic. So this mosaic basically means that they have, like I was saying earlier, they have their normal, or I wouldn't say normal, they have their underlying DNA, which would have the extra chromosome, and then they have some normal DNA, which has just the XY. So one has, some of them have the 47 chromosomes, while there's a few that have 46, and those are the ones they try to extract to implant. But it is not possible for them to have fully functional testes that spermatogenesis. And then genetic considerations. Children may inherit chromosomal abnormalities. Genetic counseling is advised. So this is the case where these individuals are male. Like, that's it. The category is male. You have a Y chromosome. You produce sperm. That's all there is to it. So it's not really more complicated than that, honestly. And so you may manifest some characteristics, and the main concern here is whether or not you should reproduce. And if you have the mosaic syndrome, Klinefelter, then you're more likely to be able to reproduce. And whether or not you should is kind of, I'll leave that up to you. So Turner syndrome, resulting of a missing X chromosome in individuals with XX karyotype, leading to gonadal dysgenesis and incomplete development of secondary sex characteristics. So these are all females, all of them. None of them have a Y chromosome. So, reproductive potential. Pregnancy is possible through ART using donor eggs that are very rare cases of natural conception in mosaic Turner syndrome. So, not possible. Natural conception is typically not possible due to the gonadal dysgenesis and non-functional ovaries. So, almost all cases, Turner syndrome has they have no eggs, but they still have a uterus, so they can take somebody else's eggs, and they're not reproducing. They're just using somebody else to get pregnant, using somebody else's eggs to get pregnant. So in this case, almost all, if not all, of Turner syndrome individuals cannot reproduce. So functional ovaries, it's not possible for most of them. Streak gonads are basically when you have non-functional gonads. They are not that you have them, but sometimes it's either there's a deformation or whatever. Either way, they do not function as intended. Genetic considerations, high risk of complication during pregnancy, often require careful medical monitoring. So it's like, even if you could get pregnant, it's high risk and you need to be careful. So just keep that in consideration. Obviously, all of you talk to your doctors about these things. I'm not a doctor. At least I won't. I'm not yet. And then you have XX male syndrome, or de la Chapelle syndrome. And this is one of the most complicated, and I would say one that makes it very difficult. And I think this is the one I spent the most time understanding. But the result of this translocation of the SRY gene, normally on the Y chromosome, onto one of the X chromosomes in an individual with an XX karyotype. Was this mind-numbing? So you have the Y chromosome, and the SRY gene that's responsible for most of the changes that develop into a male was transplanted onto an X chromosome and into this individual. So this individual is female. They do not have a Y chromosome. They just have some of the things that affect what would result in a Y chromosome. But the main point here is that because the SRY gene was transmuted onto an X chromosome, it makes whatever manifests as a result useless, because it's not possible for them to have functional testes because they have the absence of the Y chromosome. So while they manifest the secondary characters, primary and secondary sex characteristics typical of a male, they cannot have sperm. And this is like, look, all this is okay if you're this kind of person. Like, I mean, who's gonna, if you wanted to tell people like you're a male to make yourself feel comfortable or whatever it is, like, do what you have to do. But in the end, you're really just choosing to lie. And that's really what it comes down to, is like, I know him. Like, if you accept, you just know you're a female. Like, we just can understand that it's okay. It's like, I have a particular syndrome that makes me female, but I'm a male. And like, obviously you don't even need to tell people that, because they're just going to go with whatever their gut instinct is. But that's up to you to decide, and whether or not you want to, how you want to identify or whatever. But I'm just arguing the points from either side. And you'll see that I do try my best to give gender its due, and you'll see. Okay, so non-functional testes, not possible. Although testes develop due to the presence of SRY gene, they do not produce viable sperm. Genetic considerations, infertility is a definitive outcome. ART is not effective for biological reproduction, so it's not possible for them to reproduce at all. Okay, so then we have Swyer syndrome. XY gonadal dysgenesis. These are males. Results in mutations of the gene responsible for testes development. So there's mutations in the SRY gene and some other possible genes, leading to the development of non-functional streak gonads as individuals with the XY karyotype. Okay, reproductive potential. Possible pregnancy is possible through ART using donor eggs. Not possible. Natural conception is not possible due to streak gonads. Streak gonads are not functional, producing eggs or sperm. Infertility is definitive outcome. Donor eggs are the only option for biological children. So these individuals have some functional aspects to their gonads, but the thing is they're in all cases, their gonads are they cannot be used, but they can develop a uterus, but that can be used with donor eggs and a sperm. So they can, in vitro, they put the sperm in the egg and then they inject it into the uterus of these males, and then they have a male pregnancy. So this is a very interesting thing, that a male can get pregnant. But obviously this is a crazy scenario, and yeah, they can. And males can get pregnant, but this is someone with this particular syndrome, and the chances of them having a viable uterus, I don't know what those are, but it's probably much lower than the average person, obviously, and it needs to be discussed with the doctor. So a male can give birth. But obviously that's different from saying, can a male create eggs? No. And in this individual, because their resistance to the androgen hormone that is responsible for most of them, their manifestation of some of the characteristics, is that they will no longer be able to produce any gamete. So they don't have sperm or eggs that they're able to develop as a result. But if they did have a functional testes, they would have sperm. So the uterus is an organ, obviously, but it's not, and it's a female organ, but it's something that can manifest as a result of hormones. So it's not that, like, if you were to just, regardless of somebody's sex chromosomes, you can influence them by injecting them with particular hormones. So you can change the epigenetics and the function, or what these genes are being told to do and these cells are being told to do, by which hormones are manifesting inside of it. So we can have vast manipulation when it comes to the hormones we inject into children and babies, in order to change what manifests as a result. And that's what your body's supposed to do in a healthy way. So this is obviously unhealthy, and it's not normal. I'm sorry to say it's you can still be healthy and have these conditions, but it's not normal. It's abnormal. And I would say anything that's at least 2 standard deviations outside of the mean is something I would consider abnormal in a human. So let's see. Reproduction is not possible, like you're discussing. Functional ovaries and testes, neither are possible, even though they could have both or one or the other. Infertile and donor eggs are the only option for biological children. So males can get pregnant when they have a functional uterus. So mixed gonadal dysgenesis result of mass. I have trouble with this word. Mosaic, but mosaicism, such an annoying word to say, or mutations affecting gonadal development, leading to the presence of both testicular and ovarian tissue and streak gonads in the same individual. So again, those streak gonads cannot be used or functional. No individual with this typically do not have viable eggs due to the presence of streak gonads and undeveloped ovarian tissues. So this is evidence that the presence of the Y chromosome prevents the functioning of ovaries in any case. So reproductive potential. Possible. In some cases, individuals may have functional gonadal tissue capable of producing viable sperm or eggs, but it is rare. Not possible. Many individuals have streak gonads or undeveloped tissues, leading to infertility. I'm not sure how it rectifies that cognitive dissonance there, but this one's complicated. And you can look it up if you want to, but I didn't get too deep into this one because it just seemed like it was a combination of things. Okay, so over-testicular disorder, true hermaphrodism, result of genetic or developmental anomalies leading to the presence of both ovarian and testicular tissue in the same individual. Extremely rare cases have functional gonadal tissue capable of producing viable gametes, but this is highly uncommon, not possible. Most individuals do not have functional ovarian or testicular tissue capable of producing viable gametes. When it comes to the ovaries and testes, there may be partial function in gonadal tissue, but typically not enough to ensure fertility. Not possible fully functional ovaries. Genetic considerations, fertility is rare, and the ability to conceive naturally is exceptionally uncommon. So if they have both, that means they have a Y chromosome. That means they're male. Okay, I apologize for that last comment. I actually am somewhat wrong on that. But what it is true hermaphroditism. It is a combination of a lot of the other intersex conditions, and it can manifest in many ways. So it's like this is the category that is a combination of many of the other ones, but it's its own combination as a result of having both of these sex characteristics manifesting at the same time. So that's the only distinction here. It's like here are all these other categories implanted in this one category. So it makes this one very, very complicated. Triple X syndrome. So these are females. Usually, a typical female development can include mild physical and developmental differences. Triple X are fertile and have children without significant genetic issues. Ovaries may typically function, allowing normal reproduction. Generally, no significant increase for chromosomal abnormalities. So, triple X. There you go. So XYY, these are males, result in extra Y, leading to typical male development, but may include tall stature and mild cognitive differences. Most individuals are fertile and can have children. Possible testes are typical functional, produce a viable sperm. Generally, no significant chromosomal abnormalities. And then the last one, sorry, I should go through faster a little bit, but here we go. It's an XY, so this is a male. Infertility due to gonadal dysgenesis. So this person has some kind of underlying thing that prevents them from producing particular hormones, which also lead to the primary and secondary sex characteristics. So the skeletal abnormalities and sex reversal in individuals with XY karyotype. So you can research some of these even more, but more or less none of them contradict what a Y chromosome is or how it comes to be. Because if you have a Y chromosome, you cannot possibly make viable eggs. And if you have no Y chromosome, you cannot possibly make viable sperm. That's all you need to know. And all these other categories are basically just mixes and matches of different genetics and different ways, additions to the gene code, additions to the chromosomes. But as soon as a Y chromosome is present, then you are a male. Okay. Gender. All right, here's where the good stuff starts, right? Oh, let's conclude first. So all the chromosome disorders are categorized of intersex because they're the ones that actually revolve around what we consider sex to be. Lumping endocrine disorders into a miscategorization and leads to the loss of nuance and scientific understanding. Furthermore, it allows people to mix the two and confuse conclusions of each. So now we understand what sex is, what intersex is, and I've given you like a rundown of some of the categories, some of the things that come with each one. But in conclusion, all of them revolve around whether or not you have a Y chromosome. So, gender. And I'm going to stop the video and we'll go over gender in my next video. And I'll make it right after this. So it's not going to be much of a difference. It just kind of helps people digest a little bit at a time so as to not be overwhelmed. And obviously, I'm relatively new to making YouTube videos, but I'm trying to get off on the right foot with them. Like, I know that this is not going to be the most entertaining format for most people, and I'm probably not going to get a lot of views on most of these initial videos right away, hopefully in the future. But I know that I'm going to eventually elaborate on these much more deeply, a lot of these concepts and ideas, because I've been writing for the better part of 4 years. But I appreciate you guys watching, and I hope you enjoyed and learned something from this. So we went over sex In my next video, I'm going to go over gender, and then I may dabble a little bit into the categorical differences that people are forcing onto sex to categorize it as gender and to try to separate those two. But I'm going to link the whole paper in the description so that you guys can read it if you like. If you want to delve into some of the things that I've went over, or even add comments. Like, you can add comments in the section, the comment section below, and I'll respond to all of you if I can. Or you can comment on my paper if you think that I need some kind of correction, anything. That's why I want to do it on these papers, because these can involve the community in trying to rectify what I'm saying. And obviously, when people make a comment, I'm going to double check the sources. I'm going to double check all these things. But I really want everyone's feedback. I do not think anything that I'm doing requires just me. I want everyone to be involved in this exploration of truth. And that's what I'm trying to find. So if you guys can help me find more truth, then I would love to hear it, especially if it's done in the service of bettering humanity, bettering everything. So I love you guys, and I hope you learned something, and I'll see you guys next time.